Hello everybody, Eternal Flame here, and today I'm here to cover JJK Chapter 253, The Decisive Battle in the Uninhabited Demon-Infested Shinjuku, Part 25. Gege has that 10 out of 10 naming ability. As y'all know, Gege is the best when it comes to naming things. But without further ado, let's actually get into this chapter. Now, there is an entire colored page from this chapter that directly came from it, but I'm not going to show it, purely because I don't want to risk getting this video age restricted. So without further ado, let's actually get into the chapter itself, where it directly starts with them asking the question of who is the strongest grade 1 sorcerer. And with Mei, Nanami, a Nanami flashback, as well as Gojo Satoru himself, all in a flashback by the way, so this is probably before the series started because Gojo's not shirtless, that Kusakabe, Kusa Goatbee himself, is the strongest of the grade 1 sorcerers. Which I already knew. After all, I had said in the past that Kusakabe does beat Nanami in a versus battle, which if you haven't checked out that versus battle, go check it out when you're done with this video. But more importantly, something even more interesting happens in the flashback where Gojo says, if we're not including the big 3 families. Which does confirm there are some grade 1 sorcerers among each of the big 3 families. Like, I know this is probably in direct reference to Naoya and Naobito, but this could also be in reference to the Gojo clan and the Kamo clan both having grade 1 sorcerers in them, which would make a lot of sense, but that would also mean even though that Gojo is gone, there are still grade 1 sorcerers in the clan, and it makes me really wonder, were there just some members of the Gojo clan that were hoping that Gojo would die, and the second they saw that Sukuna had respawned, they were like, alright, now is the time. Now is the time that it's going to be our turn. We're having a child, and we're going to get that child the 6 size plus limitless, and we're going to get lucky, and we'll win this lottery. We just need to make a bet that Sukuna is going to kill him. And then this child, like, they just spawn a child that has the 6 size plus limitless. It's basically the entire discussion of people trying to time out when the Avatar is about to die, but instead of the Avatar, it's the 6 eyes. Sorry that I got a bit off track, but this is just like the immediate thought on my mind on, were there people timing out and hoping against Gojo that he would end up dying because they could just be like, now is our time to have the chosen one. After all, Gojo got what he wanted, now we're gonna get what we want. Kusakabe also said someone that's not him or Usami. Now, we don't really know who Usami is, but I've seen some theories going around that Usami is Mei's real name. Another theory that Usami is Kusakabe's little sibling that we don't know about, but either way, we don't know who they are. They might become more relevant later, but we don't know. As the battle between Maki and Sukuna continues, with Maki directly dashing at Sukuna and deflecting his hand, which was throwing out a dismantle that ended up making a building fall down on Maki and himself in a really cool moment of area usage and area advantage, because Sukuna is surprisingly really good at area usage. As then right after we see Sukuna catch the Soul Split Katana between his 2 hands, where his 2 hands look to be a little bit shaded. Now this has caused a lot of debate among the fandom, and there are really 3 ways you can look at this depending on your answer. Number 1, Sukuna is basically doing what he did against Yuta Okkotsu, where instead he is covering his hands directly with Dismantle. Number 2, which is what I think is actually much more likely, that only the tip of the blade actually has the Durandake property. For those of you who question why the Soul Split Katana is able to negate durability, it's because it directly cuts the soul, and the narrator states that the Soul Split Katana just doesn't care about durability at all. However, if it's only at the tip of the Soul Split Katana, it would make a lot of sense. Furthermore, it would also explain why Maki didn't go for the head and instead went through a stab through the chest, because the ability to negate durability would work a lot better as a stabbing motion than it would as a slashing motion. And finally, the possibility that Gege just forgot. But no matter what, this is still something that I feel needs to be talked about, and I'm going to give my answer to what I think it is out of these 3 later into the video, because this does happen again. Where it says Sukuna uses cars against Maki as a distraction, hiding behind one of the cars, mainly to take advantage of the fact that Maki is unable to sense where Sukuna is, because most sorcerers would be able to sense the massive curse energy beacon that is Sukuna. However, Maki is limited because of the fact that she doesn't have access to curse energy sensory, and has limited to only area-based sensory thanks to her heavenly restriction, which results in Maki being launched into 2 buildings, and Sukuna does something that's incredibly impressive movement speed-wise, because while Maki is being launched back by dismantles, Sukuna manages to sneak into the building, go across the hallway, and go across the other side and hit Maki. Now, for the longest time, I've been of the opinion that Sukuna is faster than his curse technique, but I think this just straight up confirms it for me, and I think it's going to confirm it for a lot of people, because Sukuna managed to appear on the opposite side of the Maki, on the side of the building, go across a hallway, and get to Maki's side, all before Maki was finished being launched by the dismantle, which this is insanely fast considering how fast Sukuna's dismantles even are to begin with. And this is just showing that Sukuna is blatantly faster than the dismantles. As it's then right after, Sukuna near immediately lands a massive wave of cleave directly on Maki's side, before Ino attempts to attack him. He attempts to be a champ, however Sukuna kind of just launches him away by kicking him and then launching slashes at him. And yeah, Ino is probably dead, but Ino tried his best. And it's then the GOAT himself jumps down, attempting to slash Sukuna with Nanami's curse tool. Stack that with the fact that Kusakabe is the strongest sorcerer of a grade 1 level. But Sukuna blocks it and then smacks Kusakabe away. Before it's then right after, Maki rejoins into the fight and throws Sukuna away into a wall before throwing a block of concrete directly at Sukuna. Now this so far has been a lot of fighting and I am really enjoying this. But now we're finally getting some internal dialogue, which I'm very excited about to read. As Maki thinks to herself, even if we manage to save Yuta, if this fight drags on any longer, it'll spell all sorts of trouble. I'll crush him right here and right now. Effectively, this is Maki just straight up walking in, and Maki being uncertain if Yuta is going to survive or not, which, I mean, fair. Yuta was literally cut in half. I don't know why y'all are so certain that Yuta is actually going to survive just because Rika caught him. Of course, there's a pretty good chance that Yuta's going to survive, but I wouldn't say that for certain. Before it's then, we get a line from the narrator themselves, because the narrator has returned. As the narrator says, Kashimo Hajime, Higuruma Hiromi, Okotsu Yuta. Following the death of Gojo Satoru, many that represented the peaks of sorcery stood before Sukuna, barring their own particular honed fangs. However, they amounted to nothing more than appetizers for the beast. Who truly roused his hunger was none other than Zenin Maki, who had abandoned Jujutsu sorcery by means of heavenly restriction. This reality brought the King of Curses to ecstasy. Now this is something extremely interesting because it considers each of the sorcerers that have recently fought and died against Sukuna or have been pushing against Sukuna up to this point as a peak of sorcery in their own way, which we know Yuta's peak of sorcery was like being the second strongest of the modern era and now strongest of the modern era, as well as Higuruma having one of the grandest potentials, but it really makes you question, what was Kashimo the peak of sorcery in? Because that makes me kind of curious. So it could have been either the narrator basically saying that Kashimo was the peak of his era, it doesn't really matter. However, the more important part of this is the fact that Maki had honed his interest the most, and that is because Maki had foregone Jujutsu as a whole. And now you get the interesting battle of the peak of sorcery versus the peak of humanity, something I actually talked about in my Maki hype video. As it's then Maki tries to kick some blocks at Sukuna, however Sukuna grabs her face and uses cleave on the face, or just, like, it looks like he uses cleave, but we can't tell if it was his hand just taking a part of her face off, it's not too clear. But it looks like it was cleave or dismantle. However, even more terrifying, Sukuna is smiling. This man is excited. This man is happy. And if Sukuna is happy, it's terrifying. As Sukuna then says, unlike that half-assed brat, she's shaved away all until nothing but pure emptiness remains. I'm just realizing that was the first time I've actually ever sworn in a video. Like, I have sworn inside of my streams, but I've never sworn in a video. Anyways, that's on a side point. However, I really want to focus on what Sukuna just says because he directly compares Maki to Yuji and basically says Maki is the complete side of Yuji, where he basically compares Yuji directly to a heavenly restriction, which likely says even more about how Kenjaku even made Yuji. Now, I do have an entire theory for this coming soon, because this is something very important, the fact that Yuji is being compared directly to Heavenly Restriction, and that there's always been a kind of comparison between Yuji and Heavenly Restriction, whether at the start of the series with Yuji being directly stated to be physically stronger than Maki before she got the full Heavenly Restriction, or Yuji being shown to directly fight alongside Maki but not as well in 214, but I do have some theories to make on that Yuji might have been made from a Heavenly Restriction, but not all the way. As is then Sukuna begins to start freaking out in excitement, as he says, wait a minute, pause, as Sukuna then starts to freak out, getting super excited, where he then says, at its core, sorcery is all skin and flesh, and yet that body of yours is all marrow and bone. Don't you get it? Your very existence denies what it means to be a sorcerer. The outcome of this fight will prove which is worth developing, sorcerer or body. As Maki then notices soon after that Sukuna had deactivated his reverse curse technique, where he's basically focusing 100% of his curse energy into his next punch, honing in and zoning in, as it's then right after he says, you're the only one who has ever forced a roll upon me, as he grabs the Soul Split Katana, before landing a black flash on Maki, hitting Maki so hard it replayed 3 separate times in a manga. I don't know how you do that, but Sukuna just landed a black flash. But yeah, just to talk about that for a moment, Sukuna just focused everything he had into that punch more than likely, which is incredibly impressive because Maki had forced a roll onto him that Sukuna was aware of, which is why he wanted to prove Maki wrong. He more than likely wanted to end it all in one punch, through one black flash, to just show why sorcery was impressive. Because throughout his entire life, he had been fighting nothing but sorcerers. Sorcerers who he already knew he was better than. However, Maki was something entirely different. Maki was the direct antithesis of his path of power. And that was something Sukuna couldn't let stand, which was something amazing, because he showed that he couldn't let that stand by landing a black flash at him with 100% of his curse energy that he has in that moment. Deactivating RCT, taking a risk, and being rewarded for that risk by getting to land a black flash. In a funny way, it's similar to what Mahito did back when he was fighting against Yuji and why he was rewarded for landing a black flash, because he stayed who he was, in a similar way to how Sukuna did it. He also kind of looks a little bit like Mahito, but he also kind of looks a lot like Yuji, as well as Yuji lands black flashes as well. Especially considering he hit the same pose bar for bar, word for word that Yuji did against Mahito, when he was about to land his finishing black flash, which he was also focusing his full curse energy into, similar to how Sukuna did with Maki. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, they're related. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Oh, and also, I think this very heavily supports that only the tip of the Soul Split Katana is actually durability negging, because Sukuna grabs a part of the blade, which likely implies that only the tip itself can actually negate durability. After all, it doesn't actually look like he is surrounding his hands in cleave, nor would it make sense because it was basically heavily implied that Sukuna is focusing everything into this black flash punch, so him activating his technique on his hands wouldn't make a lot of sense in my opinion, so it's just very likely that only the tip of the Soul Split Katana has durability negating properties. However, I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below about that. As then, it's left with Kusakabe himself staring at Sukuna, with what looks like no one else left other than Kusakabe versus Sukuna. As Kusakabe says, "Is this really happening? Me versus Sukuna." As this is where the chapter ends. Now, I will say it's not 100% certain that Maki is dead. We don't see the body, and if there's no body, there's no guarantee of death. But I will say I am very, very certain that Maki is dead. I'm not going to lie. They just took a Sukuna Black Flash, and I don't know what they're going to do by this point. Like, Sukuna is in the state of Black Flash, where Black Flash recovers your output, and just recovers your RCT output too, and oh boy. And Kusakabe is about to fight against him too. Like, this might actually be a bit more of a problem than I was talking about last time when I made that video. So, yeah. I want to see what you guys still think in the comment section down below about this chapter. What was your rating of this chapter? Did you like it? Did you not like it? There's not really much for me to talk about other than just the entire Heavenly Restriction line and the, like, Sukuna character analysis little bit because of Sukuna wanting to basically prove sorcery as superior to the body. But yeah, there's not much I can really talk about with this chapter. I think it's a really good chapter, but yeah. I'm gonna see y'all later. Hope you all have a good day. Peace.